is Juhani. Don't bother with my last name, the Finnish last name. Nobody can pronounce them. I'm going to be talking about Android UI. First, a quick introduction to myself. I write a blog about Android UI patterns. I think that's why I was invited here. Been doing it for a couple of years. Recently, just finished a book. It's not out yet, but it will be soon, about Android UI for the Smashing magazine or the Wileys. I work for a company called Snap TV. It's a UK company. I work from here, from Munich. I live in Germany. I've been here for 4 years. I've been told that no advertisement, so that's enough for me. I don't know if this slide is needed or not. Just a quick poll about you. How many of you are Android developers? Any designers? Yes, we have one designer. So this, I usually start my presentations explaining why you need to bother about Android or why you need to care about Android. And these numbers are quite impressive, but I think this crowd doesn't need this slide really. What I'm going to be talking about is patterns and anti-patterns for UI. So basically, I changed my title of my presentation to do's and don'ts, even though the original was design patterns and anti-patterns. It's actually the same thing. Design pattern is a formal way of defining a do, and anti-pattern is a formal way of defining don't. So my presentation, I'm going to be talking about quite high level. I have, I think, 2 lines of code. I have a lot of screenshots, and I go kind of small things. I start from larger ones to explain like bigger things about UI and UI design, and I go to small details what you should do and should not do. At any point, if something is not clear, just yell out, and if you want to contest a point I give, that would be great. I'm happy to talk about any of my points. So let's just jump right in. Android, we keep hearing about fragmentation. So first thing you need to do when you go start designing for Android, you have to design for all of these things. So you don't do the iPhone thing, pick one resolution and build pixels. Right? But you can't assume certain software. We have the first thing everybody talks about is the fragmentation of different skins. This is the vanilla one. This is the gingerbread, and this is a Sense UI, and that's Samsung TouchWiz. So the phones, even if it runs the same hardware, sometimes can run different software, and all the phones look different. And even if you have the exactly same phone, the users can then install different versions of software. These are different launchers. Again, in the middle is the Android launcher for Jelly Bean. But then there's 2 custom ones which you can install. So on Android, users can install the custom launcher straight from Play Store. So their home screen might look very different from the one you have. So you can't assume that the user is running the same software you have. Even the keyboards are different. This is kind of an important thing for many things, many applications where you actually think about text input. So you cannot assume that the user is typing in one letter at a time. So that one is the default one, the keyboard, and this is the voice keyboard. So if you use it, speaks to the phone, it gets long messages. But then you have the very strange ones, like this one. This is called Scene. I think this is the old version now. But this keyboard is interesting. You should try it out. So basically, it generates sentences for you. So you just press "How are you?" and then it changes the buttons, and you can. It's a very interesting model. But you can't assume that the user has the same keyboard you have. And then you have this one, right? These are the Android versions. So you can have most phones currently run the 2.3. Then you have some Honeycomb. Honeycomb is going out. Then you have some ice cream, some Jelly Bean. So you need to support the older versions as well, and you cannot assume that the older users are running the same one. We keep hearing about fragmentation being a problem, and every time I hear the word, I kind of think that somebody who's writing this didn't understand what he's talking about. So Android isn't actually, that's not a big problem. There's tools to handle it, but you just need to think about it. Here's the version. You keep seeing this all the time. But the fact is that most of the 2.2 phones or 2.3 phones have the same features. And you can build software easily that runs on all of them. Do this. Follow the guidelines. If you haven't been on this website, you should go there and read all the pages. They even made it easy, so you can go next page, and just read it. It's a very good site, and follow them. This is an important point for developers. Most of our developer. I'm a developer. I'm not a designer. But I think we, as a developers, we need to keep this in our mind. We need to design for users. We don't design for ourselves. We need to keep the users in mind. There's a lot of techniques we can use. I think this is something we use, and if it's called user-centered design. That's how you build scenarios and personas, and think about. So you have these processes you can bring into your software development process that kind of forces you to think from the user's point of view. So if you don't force yourself to think from the user's point of view, that means that you're thinking from your point of view, and you're not the user. Right? I'm not going to go into detail this one. This could be a whole separate presentation or a whole day talk about user-centered design. But think about it. Look at those technologies or techniques and things that are available. You're not your user. These are a couple of comments I got from my blog. If they are your comments, I'm sorry, I don't mean to kind of bash them, but the point is, so this was from an article I wrote that I think that the Android back button sucks. I think the back button and up button concept are really bad, and they should be fixed. Google tried to fix it with the up button, which made it actually more complex and difficult. So then I get comments like these. They're good comments, no problem, but you should not bring this to your software development saying, I don't have any problem with that one. So if somebody has a problem with that one, they're probably stupid, right? Don't think that way. Users think differently. They have different problems. We are not the users. But remember also the other way around, that your users are not designers. I keep seeing this quite a lot too. Chris, who made an application called Tweet Lane, great guy, great software, has made a mistake with his approach of picking which features he should build. He goes to Twitter and asks, what do you want to have? That's a problem. Your users are not designers. They want to have everything. Your users also don't know what they want to have. So don't ask your users what you want to have. Or if you do, then you go and take the data into your process and figure out what you actually need to build. There's another one. You can't read them, but these are comments from Marketplace or Google Play Store. When you upload your software in the Play Store, you start getting requests to build this feature, do this thing, right? Don't jump on them. Don't think that, OK, this user wants to have this, so if I build this, this will be better for the users. That sounds logical, but doesn't follow. You can take all the comments. You should read all the comments. You should listen to your users, but take them in as an input and try to figure out what they want to do, not what they want to have. So if your user says, this user interface would be better if you have a button here that does this thing. It probably wouldn't. It probably would be worse because the user started designing your user interface. But what you should do is you figure out what the user wants to do, why they ask for that button. And if you figure that one out, then you take that as an input and design your user interface to serve that purpose that the user wants to do, and then your user interface will be better. This is a big thing. It's not as bad as it was. It's still quite bad sometimes. Don't do this, right? So there's a lot of companies that have a design for iOS. Companies still go iOS first, no matter what Schmidt says. And then they take the iOS design and think, OK, it's just another touchscreen phone. Let's do the same thing, and copy the design. So this is the IKEA. This is official IKEA app, which has exactly the same design copied over. And the reason is it doesn't work because they're different platforms. So the users expect different ways, different things, different ways to work with the UI. And if you think about the consistency of your brand, for example, that's the one reason people keep saying. It's much more important that your app is consistent with the other applications on the same platform than the two applications are consistent between Android and iOS. Because all users use the other applications on their phone. Few users use two different platforms and the same application. So don't do this. Design for the platform. Don't copy other design. There's another point I want to make. There's these cross-platform tools. My view is that never use them, never learn them, never implement anything with them. I think they're bad. I think all of them are bad. There's something called PhoneGap. I think that's unusable. There's some called Titanium. I think it's usable, but I haven't seen a single good application made with it. I wrote an article about it in my blog, and I got, understandably, the Titanium guys got pissed off to me because I basically told them that their tool is bad. All I wanted them to show me is point me at one application that is good, and I'm convinced. So if you know an application that is actually good, built with Titanium, please send it to me. I want to know. I'm open to be convinced otherwise. But for now, I think all the cross-platform tools are bad. PhoneGap, it's simply technically impossible to build good UI. Here's the reasons why. This is the review for the IKEA application. If you do this, do you want your brand to look like this on one platform? Interesting thing about the IKEA application. So this was the official IKEA application. If you go to Google Play, at least a couple of weeks ago, and search for IKEA, it's not on the first page. You don't want this to happen to your brand, right? So design for platform. Here's a controversial one here. We keep hearing, build a tablet application. We need to build a tablet application. Don't build a tablet application. Build Scalable UI. Android is a continuum. There's no such thing as Android tablet. You don't know what is Android tablet. Is the Note a tablet or not? The difference between a 7-inch tablet and a 10-inch tablet is larger than the difference between the Note and the Nexus 7. So you cannot build a tablet application. The tablet and the phone application difference comes from the iOS because they got there first, and they have a good system. Now the people have heard about the iPhone and iPad. We need to have an iPad application. And now they think that we need to do the same thing on the Android platform. Not true. You need to think about the ways to make your application scale in a way that there's no single line, that now it goes to tablet application and now it goes to phone application. I'm going to talk about some approaches some companies taken, some good applications, how to do this. Called responsive design is the term that we use. It comes from web. So on the web, we've seen responsive side. That means that when you scale the browser or you open it on phone or do something, the components relay out themselves. So it doesn't always squash, but it goes and changes the menu structure here and moves some other components and ditches some other components. We need to do the same thing on Android. And the Android tools are actually more powerful than the web tools. It's actually easier. And you can create better responsive UI, and that's the key to do. Here's the reason why you need to do something. So when I say don't build a tablet UI, tablet application, I don't mean don't build a UI that works well on tablet. This doesn't work well on tablet. This is the Twitter application. Apple used this example. We don't want Apple to use our examples for Android being bad. Good application is the Google Play Store. There's a couple of reasons why it's good. Firstly, it adapts really nicely. It has some usability problems, but it adapts really nicely. Secondly, one of the lead developers, Kirill, somebody remembers his last name? Anyways, Kirill writes a blog about it. So he's written multiple posts about implementing this very application, the Google Play Store. So this is a good example. Think about, in my opinion, now that the Android tablets are quite popular, getting popular, the Nexus 7 is popular. There's quite a few of them outside. You should probably start your design from tablet. To get a big screen and think about how your application should look on a big screen, and think about the ways you can then adapt it to smaller one. So let's go through a couple of ways to see how you could take, for example, this UI, what you do to take it to a smaller screen. So first approach is to just rearrange. This is the web way. This is what happens on the web UIs. A big screen goes to smaller screen. Google does this on the Google Play. They use the same components. This big UI is split into clusters of components or layouts, and they take the same layout and just mix them up for the phone. So these two are exactly the same code, as well as these two. You can see that these are rearranged a bit differently, even inside the same component, but they still are the same. So what they do, they just rearrange the components. They work well on phone and tablet. Then there's another one. This is the most popular one. A couple of reasons against this one. So this is the multi-pane layout. Google talks about this in their design guidelines. The SDK, the Android tools for Eclipse now supports building this with one click. If you haven't built a multi-pane layout that adapts to two different screens, go and start a new application in the Eclipse, and you can try it out on your phone, on your tablet. But this idea is simple. You have a couple of screens, which you put into one on the tablet, or the other way around. You have a couple of containers, and you split them up. This app is called Tasks. I love this application. You should go and download it. You can get it for free. It's a good example how the applications look with the default Holo themes. It's a good example how to follow the guidelines, and it does some quite nice things. It also adapts really nicely. So what this guy's done, they have the left side of this where they have the list of the to-do items, and then they have the details. So when I click one of the details, I go to the details screen on the phone. On a tablet, it just changes to other panel. Very good idea, and works really well, and very easy to implement. Then there's third way, which is the application called Aldico. They do. So they have quite nice tablet front page on the application. It's visually really, well, it's good. The problem is that all of this stuff doesn't fit on the phone screen. So what they do, they take a part of the UI and they say, don't really need it. So on the phone landing page, this part is not there at all. Everything's fine. So they thought that this is something extra they can provide for tablets. They try to sell, basically, books on that one. So they sell more books on the tablet anyways, which is a good idea. On the phone, they don't try to cram everything in, because users can use the application the same without seeing the promotional books or the best featured titles. Good idea. let's talk about a little bit from the technical point of view. Most of us are developers here. So think about making each of the layouts scalable. The tools are all awesome. The responsive or the relative layout tool for the ADT is good. It can be a bit difficult to learn when you're a new developer to understand how to use the relative layout. Then just take the tool and drag the components around. It kind of demonstrates all of these things. It's getting better all the time. Learn the layout components you have in the SDK. You can build your own, but you usually don't have to. There's really, really good ones. One thing you should never use is the absolute layout, which is still in the SDK. Never use it. It always breaks your layouts on different devices. The point of each layout is, so we talk about the responsive design, if this is an abstract UI. So if you want to make the layout responsive instead of tablet and phone, then you need to do a little bit more than just reorganizing all the components. So each one of the collections of the items, so layouts, need to be scalable themselves. If you think about this kind of UI where you have 3 panes, and if each one of these 3 is scalable, so stretches a little bit, it has minimum and it has maximum, but in between that one, it scales nicely. So if you have 3 components that scale nicely, your big layout actually stretches quite a bit. So now you can have minimum and maximum size of your layout. You know where the responsive points are, where you need to go and switch it. You understand that this one will probably not work on a portrait phone layout because they become too small. I need to rearrange them. But it probably works on portrait 7-inch. It probably works on landscape, and so on. So you need to find the points where your scalable layouts become too small or too large, and then you do the responsive side. There's a couple of things I want to talk about, like small details of user interface design, or user interfaces I've seen. So now we jump from the responsive. If you have any questions from the kind of the responsive approach for user interface design. Okay, let's go to details then. So these are a bunch of applications that do something I don't want to see them to do, or do something that is a good idea. So there's some generic ideas. This is an annoying one. So you actually have to write a piece of XML to lock to portrait mode. So don't lock to portrait mode ever. The Flipboard is an application that is on portrait. So this is the experience when you read it on a 10-inch tablet. Not a very good one. So you might think that our 10-inch tablets are only few, but you also lock the user out from all of these devices. So I used to have the Milestone or the Droid, and all the UIs which were locked to portrait. Whenever I took the keyboard out and tried to type, I have to do this. So remember that there are devices that are used in landscape. Don't lock to portrait. If you have difficulties creating a portrait or landscape UI, maybe you should take a little bit time before you release your application. Screen densities is another point. Probably talked about quite a bit, but this can be quite a difficult point. The whole point of the screen density is that we use it with our fingers, and our fingers are fixed size. They don't change size with the device. So using a phone screen, so you can have a Galaxy Nexus has an HD display. Then you can have same size phone that has a display that doesn't have so many pixels. That just means that the pixels are tighter in the Galaxy Nexus. So the Android tools have ways to fix it. The point of the whole thing is that this is an application I built which been actually pulled from the market already. There's a bad photo. So the top one is Droid, or the Milestone, and this is HTC Legend. So these are two phones side by side on table and took a photo of the application. And these are the same phones and same UIs, but these are the screenshots that are pixel to pixel on the screen. So you see that the point of the density management is that the UI is always same physical size. So you see that all the buttons are the same size on there, all the components are the same size. The only thing is because the aspect ratio is different, so the background is stretched. But then if you look on this side, the buttons are really a lot smaller in here than there. That's because the legend screen is smaller density, so it has more pixels, less pixels in the same area, so it has to stretch. Android provides tools to manage them. So what they do, because you can't provide different assets or different graphics for each different density, so they put them in buckets. There are 5 now. They had extra high density. Basically 4 you need to think about. Maybe you can ignore the low one, the medium, high, and extra high. The point is that when you create a graphical asset, you create a picture. So on a large density screen, the picture has to be larger. It has to have more pixels. On the smaller density screen, it's smaller because the pixels are larger, so they end up on the same physical size. The Android will automatically scale them runtime if you don't provide all of them when you build the application. Quite often, that's good enough. If you provide the high density one and it scales it to lower one, it usually looks pretty decent, depending on the graphic. Icons are something that scale really badly. You should always provide all the icons, at least to medium and high and extra high. So currently, extra high are the all new phones that come out are extra high, most of the new phones. The high density are the all high-end phones from a year ago or 2 years ago. Medium density are 10-inch tablets, so they are quite popular. And there's some low-end phones from a couple of years ago. I think these are the only lines of code I have. But when you define a layout, so we talked about graphics. Graphics need to be different size. But now when you define the layout, you need to use something called density-independent pixels. How many of you understand the density-independent pixels? So do I have to explain them, or should I explain them? Okay, most of them understand, so I do it quickly. So density-independent pixel is a kind of a virtual size definition that the Android understands to scale them automatically on runtime based on the device. So if you define all of your code in density-independent pixels, the Android operating system will take care of the layouts being the same size. You say that the margin needs to be this much, so it knows it's going to be this much on each device. So it's almost like you would define the layouts in physical size instead of pixel size. So always use these, never use pixels. Here's the technical definition. One density-independent pixel is 1 pixel in a medium density screen. Now, if you have pixels on your layout definitions, you're doing it wrong. Scalable graphics. 9-patch is a very powerful concept. You should always use 9-patch when you have a background that scales. At least if you have background that scales and has some border effect. So all the buttons are 9 patches. This is also a concept that came from the web. The idea is that this is a button background, so it's split down into 9 patches. So the corners never actually scale. So what happens, we scale in the middle, and you stretch in the middle. So the corners always stay same size, and the end points or the top points never scale. So if you have a border, it will always look nice, but it will still stretch nicely. There is a tool called Draw9Patch, I think, in SDK, which can help you to define this on Android. It's easier. You don't actually have to go and slice the asset. What you can do, you can define border pixels. But you should read about that in the documentation. but just remember it exists. Then, drawing from code and creating custom drawables is a very good way to create things that cannot scale. In this example, a designer came up with an idea that you need to have diagonal lines and a gradient background. There is no way I could create this one as an image. It's simply impossible. You don't know how to scale it. The only way that you could create this as an image would be to create a massive size image and center crop it. But even then, the gradient would be wrong. So the only way you have is to look into other options. And these are the XML drawable definitions that are very powerful and nice once you manage them. So you can build gradients by just saying, I want to have a gradient, a circle gradient, this radius, and it will draw it. Then another one is you can have bitmaps or PNGs, and you can tile them. So these lines are actually, I think, 10 pixels by 10 pixels, and they just tiled. So you can say to the Android SDK that I want to have this image and tile them infinitely. So that means it doesn't matter how large the background is, it will always have the same lines. And then you put another layer on top of it, which has the gradient, and you're done. It doesn't matter which size the screen is, it will always look exactly how the designer meant it. The theme of Android application is usually derived from the platform. Starting at 4.0, Google added something called Holo, which is the default themes. This is now mandated to be in each phone when the phone manufacturers launch the phone. Before that, they could have anything. So if you said, I want to have a button here, you cannot simply know what that button looks like. But even now, this is the old theme. So this is the old vanilla Android theme, so 2.3. And this is the 4.0, the 4.1. So when you build an application, this can be quite difficult for designers. They need to think, they need to make a choice. There's two bad choices. There's no good one. So when you design the look of your application, what you should do, you should start from Holo theme and start changing from that one. And then you have the basis right. It will always look nice, and all the phones, it will look same. But we still have the 2.3 phones out there, and that's actually the biggest platform currently. The same application will look totally different on 2.3. If you run it on HTC device, it will look green. If you run it on Sony, it will be blue. If you run it on vanilla, it will be orange. So what the designer should do is, there's two options. Either you backport Holo, which is possible. There's if you go to GitHub, it's something called Holo Everywhere. There's a project that allows you to take exactly this look and deploy it on all devices, older devices. But should you do it? I'm not sure. I don't have a solution for this one. This is a big problem. Because if you take the Holo to 2.3, your application will look wrong. It will not look the same as all the other applications. But if you don't, then your application will look random on that one. So you need to think, pick one of those options. I think the better choice is to use as much default components as possible and test it on all the devices and see how it looks. Google is starting to do the backporting thing. So if you look at the Google application on all the devices, they start to look like Holo apps. So maybe at some point we can just take Holo and port it back. But for now, it's a problem. So here's an example from Twitter on ice cream sandwich. So they done the other way around. So they have hard-coded or created the theme for each component in their application. So now the Twitter application actually looks wrong on ice cream sandwich and Jelly Bean because they don't use Holo. So Navigation on the applications. Mobile phones are used in different use context than desktops. Users don't stare at them and try to figure them out. Users have not used to the idea that they have to be baffled by the applications like we have on desktops. We have this disaster called Windows 8 coming, and these people are going to be happy with it because they've used to the idea that the computers are difficult to use. Fortunately, on phones, it's a different situation. Apple showed on iPhone that they don't actually have to be, and we on Android have followed, and the Android phones aren't that difficult to use anymore. So navigation in the phone has to be simple, and the user has to understand it. Just keep it flat and simple, and think about where the users are using it. You are in U-Bahn, and you take your phone out in public ticket, and then you need to get out and take a next U-Bahn, and take your phone out again, and you don't remember where you were. If the user has to remember where they were in the application to be able to use it, it's wrong. So this is what I meant when I talked about the app concept being confusing. This background here is actually from the Android design site, trying to explain the difference between up and back. There is no way users understand this because we don't understand it. As a developer, the Jelly Bean offers some ways for us to define the structure of the pages because we can now define the parent activity. But for us as a developer, so we have problems figuring out how the app should work. If you take the Google Plus application, the latest Google Plus application, it is possible to go in the situation in the application where you are reading something and you press up and the app exits. So if Google can't get it right, can we get it right? Probably not. I think the app concept, I hope the app concept will go away. It is a design guideline right now, so you should follow it. When you have app, do it exactly the way it's defined in the guidelines. Don't reinvent the wheel. But there's better options. I like this one better. I'm a big fan of the side navigation. This is from an application called, I forgot the name of the application. It's a French application. I don't know how to use it, but I know the guy who wrote it. And the implementation is brilliant. So basically, what the difference between the side navigation and the up navigation is that on side navigation, you can go from any page to any page. The side navigation is coming to Google applications also, but the implementation is bad, I think, because you have to go up. And then on the top page, you press up, the side navigation comes up. So they basically just replaced the dashboard, which doesn't make any sense to me. I hope they will change it. But this is so applications like Evernote, Facebook, there's some other applications, bigger applications that use it this right. And when you use it, it's actually really nice. The point is that from wherever you are, you navigate somewhere in your application, and you want to go to another part of the application, you just open the side navigation, and you directly go to the front page of that part of the application. So if your application is complex, use the side navigation. It's a good way to reduce the complexity. You basically take one level of navigation out. You don't have to have front page of your application. You just have front page of different sections. But if your application is not complex, doesn't have that many pages, don't use it. Never use a concept just because you want to. Use it only because you need it. So this is another point about help users to keep track where they are. This is a very good application. It's called Songkick. If you just open this screen, this is not the front page of the application. All of you know exactly where you are. You don't have to have used the application before. You don't have to know what your navigation path was to know where you are. You also know where everything takes you. You're on your calendar and your artists. This was a controversial topic a year ago. It isn't anymore. Tabs go to top. This is a bad example. The cause for tabs going to top, not bottom like iPhone, is the hierarchy of navigation. The highest title is on the top, and so on. If you put the tabs on the bottom, you can risk causing confusion. This is a good example of which one of these tabs are the higher navigation. If you used an iPhone, you know it's this one. But if you haven't, you don't know. Funny thing is that after I made this presentation, Eurosport released a new application. They made a full redo of the UI, and this is actually a great application now. So I'm happy to use a crap example with a good replacement that actually happened this week. They made brilliant work. So this one, no confusion anymore. They actually took the tabs out. They used the drop-down thing. It doesn't really matter. But no confusing where you are in the application anymore. Brilliant application. One argument I always get when I say that should be top, I say it's difficult to reach because your thumb is not so long. Swipe. Always swipe between tabs. Create application. It doesn't matter how you don't have to reach the top tabs if you just can swipe between the tabs. The swipe is never the only solution, but it's a shortcut for the people who know how to use it. Menu button is gone. It will never be back, no matter what Samsung says. This menu isn't there anymore. It's gone. It was a bad design choice anyways, especially the hardware button. It actually isn't that bad with the jelly bean or the ice cream sandwich soft button. The design problem with the menu originally was that users never knew if it were there or not, because you had to go and press the button, see if this have a menu, and you go through all the screens and pressing the button, and that's a bad approach for anything. So don't use menu anywhere. It's easy fix if you want to get rid of your menu. You just change your target version to this one. So you just say to the operating system that I actually know that menu is gone. I'm going to be using the new one, and the menu is going to be on the action bar. Intents. It annoys me when I see an application when you go and you press share. Usually the share button in this case is the iPhone share button. If I press share and I see Facebook, Twitter. Why do you limit me to Facebook and Twitter? Firstly, I use Google+. I don't use Facebook. Why can't I share to Google+? The reason is that the developer hadn't known that there's this intent thing that can be used. Intents are one of the most powerful features of the whole Android platform. All you say is, I want to share this piece of text. And you send it to the platform, and the platform figures out which applications can share it. And in this case, I can use the TweetLane application instead of Twitter application to share it. And I don't have to give my login credentials to the other application. I download a random application from Google Play, and it asks me my Twitter password. I'm not going to give it to you. Use Android icons. Icons are difficult topic. It's very difficult to design icons that are descriptive. Users won't understand icons if you just come up with an icon. There's no way they understand. But if you use the platform icons, which there are many, your users will understand. Songkick, again, brilliant application, uses the platform share button. The share button isn't as descriptive. I wouldn't know what it does unless I've been an Android user for a long time, and a lot of people know. So those two buttons, everybody know what they do. But if you use other icons, especially if you bring them from iOS, users might be confused. This application is a good example how to fail in every single design. Download this. This is a featured application on Google Play right now, and it infuriates me. I can't understand how Google can feature this application. They failed in every single place. This is the worst design for tabs I've ever seen. I wrote a post about it. I don't go through it again because I'm short of time. But the point of this was don't use the back button on the UI. Android phones have back buttons. Users know how to use it. The back button will confuse them in the UI, especially now that there's the up concept. You don't know if it's up or back button. Always use rely on the phone back button. Don't put the back button on the screen. If you have an up button, use the up as up. Never use pop-ups. This is another example. There's no reason to use pop-ups ever in your whole life. None. Not exactly fully true, but if you take that attitude, and when you want to use a pop-up, you have to convince yourself that there's absolutely no other way to do it. This is Google Play application on Google TV, and when you install an application on Google TV, it installs in the background, and then you continue doing something else, and once the installation is ready, it goes ping. It doesn't matter what you do, it blocks you to do what you were doing by asking, hey, I finished the installation in the background, do you want to open the application? I said, no way. Never use pop-ups. There's better ways to do things. These are two applications that do it really well. Google Plus, when you lose connection, it shows just a message on top of the thing saying, I can't read more, can't get more messages. Which is good in a couple of reasons. Firstly, that's the place where the new messages would come. Second, that doesn't block you from using the application at all. You can just keep using it and say, OK, I'm in bad connection, I'm in airplane or whatever. Other one, Evernote, really nice application. It just shows I'm doing something in here. And if you have a connection, it just shows here. Connection problem, it shows here. That's a good way to do it. Don't block your users. If you have to notify something, use a notification. So notifications are meant for things that happen in background, not in the user is you doing something, and they see that something happens on the screen and notify on that one. Also, don't notify on something that the user hasn't requested to be notified. The Spiegel Online application notifies you on news by default. Splash screens. Splash screens don't add any value to your application at all. That's, again, from the use concept of phones. Phones are used for 10 seconds. If your splash screen is there for 3 seconds, you delayed the user to get to the content for that time. I know why The Verge is using that one. It's because of the advertisement. They probably have a deal. But don't use splash screens on your applications. TV applications are probably a bit different. I think TVs could use splash screens. But any phones or tablet application, never use them. No value. Don't use tutorial screens. Tutorial screens are bad for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the users install the application more than once. If you have an application on Play and the user installs it 3 times on that phone, I keep installing applications again when I change devices and try another ones. And always I see the tutorial screen. I already know how to use the application. Why do you tell me again? Especially, this is a great application. I hate to use an example as the worst tutorial screen I've seen as the application. I love the application otherwise. The Pocket application, great application. It asks you if you already have an account or do you want to create an account. If I sign up with an existing account, the chances are much higher, at least, that I already used the application. But it still shows me the tutorial screen. It first shows me some useless details. Then it goes some more useless details I already know. Then it goes, hey, some more useless details. I already know this one. And then, where's the next button? I reached at the end of the thing, and now I have to press the button in the middle that I've been avoiding before. So don't use tutorial screens. Do it better ways. Evernote does it brilliantly. It doesn't show you a tutorial screen when you start it up. But you can get the tutorials. I'm not saying that you shouldn't guide users. You should. But do it the way Evernote does. When a user wants to get the information, they get it. The splash screen or the tutorial screens also have the problem that if the user is actually new and wants to get the information, they haven't used the application before, they don't have any context what you're talking about. They're looking at screen and they don't know what is the screen. But if you let the users try it out first and then provide the information, and especially if you do the way Evernote does it, you press, I want to know this one, and it goes to the actual screen and highlights the bit that you're interested about and has a short message what it does. And then you just press X and you remain on the same screen and you know what to do. take a look at the Evernote tutorial screens. If you want to create tutorial screen, copy them. That's a good idea. Running out of time, but don't force users to log in. There are very few applications that actually cannot do anything if the user hasn't given their credentials. Twitter, another bad example. So if you open the Twitter application, have it logged in, this is all you need. You have two options. But if you go to twitter.com and haven't signed in, this is what you see. So why can't I read tweets on my mobile phone without logging in? The point of this thing is that Twitter is probably an example. Everybody knows what Twitter is. They know if I want to use Twitter or not. But your application, my application, even if we think that we only provide it for people who already are customers, there are going to be people who install it for the very first time. They see your logo and two fields, password and username. And they go like, yeah, screw this. You lost a customer. The Google Play Store is such a great place to market your brand and getting your application out there that don't force them log in. Figure out a way how to use your application a little bit before you force to log in. It doesn't mean that you have to provide all the functionality, but let them try it out. Here's an example. Evernote, which is a great application, bad example, this one. Catchnote, much better. So this is the first screen when I see on Evernote. I have no access to the application. My access is blocked. On Catchnote, this application does do the same thing. They have cloud storage for notes. Firstly, it allows me to log in with Facebook and Google, which is nice. But this text here, which you can't probably read, but you can probably read it here, is the key. What they do, they get me the application saying, all right, I don't know this application. Maybe I shouldn't create an account. But I press this button anyways, and you get into the application. And they prove that I want to have the account. They just won a customer. Evernote lost one. This is a quick one. Don't hide the status bar. It's very easy to avoid. If you hide the status bar, provide a way to use it to see the status bar easily, like the Google Play Store book, Google Books, or the reading thing. In 4.0, it used to hide the status bar, and you couldn't get it back. But now, if you tap the screen, it actually the status bar comes back down. But there's many applications that hide the status bar fully, which is a problem because of the use context of the application. What if I'm reading a book and waiting my friend to send me a message? Every time I hear the notification, I have to go to home screen to see if the notification was about the message I was waiting for. Don't think that the users only want to use your application. They do a lot of different things. So don't block the status bar. Always show the status bar if you don't have any reasons to hide it. And if you hide it, provide a way to see it. This is one thing we see in the geek community quite often. I think this, for Linux, is a good example of this one. I'm a Linux user, don't lynch me. So customization is not alternative to design. I've taken screenshots of all property screens of an application. So where do you go to set up the thing you actually want? There is reason why there's a property screen. There are properties that users actually want to change. Only give them those alternatives. Don't do this. You are the designer. You are the professionals. Users are not. All these examples, every single one of them, should not be here. Should we use pull to refresh? It's your call. You decide if your application uses pull to refresh. I like it. Some other people don't. Should pull to refresh work if it's empty? Should you use swipe to scrolling? Yes, you should use swipe to scrolling every time. Don't give the alternative. Then you have some time settings, mention highlights, color settings. Don't do this. You designed the application, you created the best application, and you made those choices. Those are your choices. And when you do them right, users don't look for this settings menu. Last thing, put your application in front of real users. You build an application you think it's best. Before you push it out, or better even if before you build it, give it to some other people. Usability testing, formal usability testing is expensive. You don't have to do it yourself if you're building your own application. If you're doing a company, if you're doing a big application for your company, try to convince them to pay for proper usability testing. It's actually worth it. Because these problems are going to be found either in the usability testing or after it's launched. Same thing as with normal testing. But if you're doing your own application or if you're doing a small budget application, it's understandable you don't want to do this way. What you should do then, you give it to your friends, saying you want to do this, and don't ask them to press this button. Tell them, do this whole thing. Try to figure out the user goal they want to do, and saying, how would you do this on this device? Friends are a bit bad because they won't be so critical. What they're going to say, yeah, it's great, and then they think it sucks. But what you can do, try to find people you don't know, friends, I get. And don't tell them you built it. Tell them you're writing a blog post. Tell them you were hired to critique this application. You think it's bad. Or try to make them feel comfortable telling that there's a problem or not understanding it. Just give it to somebody who's not technical and not in your team. The most important thing, this is from Will Wheaton saying, don't be a dick. The whole point of this thing is that your application is part of the platform. Do not think that your application is the reason users bought the phone. That's the only thing it runs on the phone. It's going to be part of the platform. So don't try to sabotage other applications. Provide easy connectivity to all the other applications, and so on. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm really open to discussions, either here or afterwards. I'm going to be here the whole day. No questions. I'm done then.